Hey Breck students, Frank here from AFP with the second part to the basic components of building a home studio video lesson. I just want to talk about the different types of audio interface that we could, look into when going about building our own studio. So when I was starting out, I had a friend lend me this really cute device. This is called an audio interface. This was my introduction to a recording interface that allowed me to record in both stereo and mono. It had one input, one XLR input, which is, I'm going to get into what an XLR cable is in a bit, and one instrument cable input. You can see the little guitar has an icon for instrument. And this little button here selects between the two channels right here. You can record instrument or record XLR in. And right here, these are what are called RCA cables, outputs. So you can see the female output jacks here. You would put a cable in here from a speaker, left and right. So red and white indicate left and right. And this is the USB source that connects to the computer. So this was my first real introduction to recording music right here. I didn't know how to get sound onto the computer, and this is kind of how I learned how to do it. All right, so this device right here, if you go on reverb.com, Sweetwater, once this all clears, if you guys go to Guitar Center, you can find one of these for like anywhere between $49.99 to like $100, basically $50. It's pretty cool. You can find them used online for $20, sometimes even $15. I've seen these. These are really lightweight. I've dropped this hundreds of times, and it's nothing bad has ever happened. It doesn't even rattle. It's pretty sturdy. I've traveled with this. I've recorded, believe it or not, I've recorded drums with this, just using these two tracks. It was really interesting. I got pretty interesting sound. I probably wouldn't go for that right now, but this was my introduction, and yeah, pretty cool. All right, so let's move up a little bit. Now, before I go to the next example of an audio interface, I know that and I'm talking specifically to the guitarist out there, there are certain types of guitar pedals that record guitar straight to the computer from the guitar pedal. Actually, I used to have one. I won't bring it out right now, but I used to have like this multi-effects guitar pedal that had a USB out, and I could, basically record straight from this guitar pedal onto my computer, which I thought was always pretty cool. And I know there's a couple of vocal units that do that you could have they're like on stage, or like, for the floor, like, something to have like to change while you're singing, much like a guitar pedal, to change the effects. But they would have a USB out, so you could like go straight to the computer and record vocals and use the pedal as an interface. So that's also an option that you can look out for. And all right, so this leads me to my next example of an audio interface. This is the Focusrite 2i2. I think I've spoke about this a couple of times. I've talked about it in my previous videos. This is not mine. This is my friend Elijah. Thank you, Elijah, for lending me this during the time of us recording on an album together. So basically, this unit has two channels, both XLR, and if you can see the little hole in the middle, that is indeed an instrument input. So I could, switch between using an XLR or an instrument by this little switch right here. And these are my gain knobs. And my other, I didn't talk about that. I should have spoken about that too here. Same thing with this interface. It has a mic input, which is basically the gain knob. It has a mix control, so you can mix between your headphones and your DAW, which is pretty interesting. And it has a stereo and mono option. I can monitor my output, which are like my speakers, the monitors I'm using. So yeah, that's what this one does. And very similar, this one has the option to use line or instrument, there's two gain knobs, and I could, the cool thing about this Focusrite unit is that I could direct monitor, or I can turn monitoring off and kind of like, you know, and like mute the monitors from, you know, playing and just have the headphones on. And that's cool because that's helpful for latency. If you don't have monitors and you just want to hear what your sound is from this unit alone, that switch allows you to do that. Right above that, I don't know if you can see, is the Phantom Power, also known as the 48 volt plus button. And this function is for condenser microphones, and I'm going to get into what that is a little bit later. But I have a single input here, and I said single input, excuse me, a single headphone jack here, so I can plug a headphone in, and I can, you know, basically get a headphone level and just have a headphone monitor input separate from my monitors. So let's turn it around. So here we have line outputs 2 and 1, or 1 and 2 rather. That is your monitor out. So if you let's say you get a pair of studio monitors, whether they be like JBLs or PreSonus or something a little low end like M Audio or Alesis, you can find a pair with 1/4 inch or TRS to 1/4 inch out. Don't get intimidated by the terminology. I'm going to break all of that down to you in the next video. And yeah, so this is basically for your left and right speakers, and this is your USB out, just like this one. So they kind of have a very similar style. So I can't really turn this around. I guess I can do this like this. I'm going to grab my camera and just bring it over here. See, can I? Perfect. So this right here is the Focusrite Safire Pro 40. This is a slightly more expensive unit. I'm trying not to. I'm holding the camera in reverse, so this is a little difficult. But basically, this interface is a little more high end than the two interface I just showed you. This is powered not by USB but by Firewire, and it has 8 channels. Very similar to the 2i2, I could have instrument cables in my I can have instrument cables on my XLR's inputs. So you can see like a similar input in the front of the unit. I'm not going to turn this around, but there's more inputs on the back that are both XLR and line in. So it's pretty cool. And line in is basically like putting in an instrument cable, like a guitar. For those who don't know the exact terms for the instrument cables, it's like a guitar cable. It looks like this, you know. So I can put this into both my 2i2 and my Safire Pro 40. So just stepping back a little bit and talking about the Scarlet 2i2, this device costs, I think it costs around $200, or maybe a little less, maybe $150. I've seen this used all the time for $80 and less. I've seen it for $50, I've seen it for $80, and I've seen them like a little scratched up for like $40 and $50. You can find this literally on almost every online music market or a music store like American Music Exchange or Reverb, Sweetwater, Guitar Center, Sam Ash, etc. have a bunch of these used. These are cool. I recommend using these for people who are starting. Like this, I recommend using this one over the small M Audio $20 audio interface. I recommend using the Focusrite 2i2 if you're starting, because you can get a stereo track going if you have like a synthesizer, or if you have some type of, if like, let's say you want to podcast here, you DJing at home, and you're like, I don't know, you could put both left and right of your outs into this and create a stereo track on your DAW, and it works really dope with, you know, electronic instruments like keyboards and synthesizers, and electric pianos and whatnot. So this is really cool to have. I would say go for something like this. And also, dude, the phantom power. You can have a really dope microphone, and I'm gonna get into in the next video what type of microphone you would use with phantom power and what phantom power does. But yeah, this is a really dope device. The next device that I showed, the Safire Pro 40, runs you about, man, I've seen it. It's changed in price. I know it was $300 when it first came out. I think you can find it used for like $180 or maybe even cheaper, like $140. Because you got to think about it. As the years go by, computers get slimmer and slimmer, and cables change, and USB ports change to Type-C, and everything kind of just flipped. So if you do end up getting a cheaper computer, which I always recommend, like getting a later version of, like if you're going to, like, people who want to go for Macs, if you want to go get a really dope MacBook Pro, don't spend like $1,000, $2,000 on a MacBook Pro, because you're going to be really disappointed. Get a MacBook Pro from like 2 or 3 years ago with, that still has Thunderbolt, that still has USB capability, and just keep it simple. Like, you don't have to. The purpose of making these videos is to explain that you don't have to go off the limb and spend your life savings on this, because it's about you. It's about what you know and what you're trying to learn, and these computers can offer the world to you if you just like really get into this. So in the next video, I'm going to be going over the different type of cables and some different types of microphones. So stay tuned, and I'm excited to talk more about this. All right, bye.